Ma'am, you need to step back and allow me to do my job.
Don't you dare tell me what to do. I know people. I know the mayor.
To cooperate with standard security.
You people always think you're in charge. Well, not today. Hey, what do you know? Let go!
The sound of that slap echoed through Terminal C at Denver International Airport like a gunshot. Passengers froze mid-conversation. Children stopped running. Even the constant hum of rolling luggage went silent for 3 seconds that felt like an eternity. Security cameras captured everything. Every word, every gesture, every moment that would destroy one woman's life and validate everything a dedicated security officer had endured for years. Karen Whitfield thought she was untouchable that Tuesday morning in March. She was about to learn exactly how wrong assumptions can be when they collide with reality and consequences. Before we continue, where are you watching from right now? Drop your country or state in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button because this story gets absolutely wild and you won't want to miss what happens next. Denver International Airport, Terminal C, Security Checkpoint 7, one of the busiest travel hubs in America where millions of passengers pass through every year. Most interactions are routine, professional, forgettable. People show identification, walk through metal detectors, collect their belongings, and continue to their gates. But occasionally, very rarely, something happens that reminds everyone watching exactly why we have laws, procedures, and consequences for people who think rules don't apply to them. Marcus Williams had been working airport security for 12 years. 12 years of early morning shifts, holiday weekends, and dealing with stressed travelers who took their frustrations out on the people just trying to keep everyone safe. He was 41 years old, married, father of 2 teenage daughters, and one of the most respected members of his security team. His supervisors called him thorough. His colleagues called him patient. Passengers who worked with him called him professional. Marcus had seen everything in 12 years. Drunk passengers, belligerent passengers, confused passengers, angry passengers. He'd been yelled at, cursed at, threatened, and accused of everything from incompetence to conspiracy. But in 12 years of service, no passenger had ever put their hands on him, until that Tuesday morning when Karen Whitfield decided that airport security procedures didn't apply to someone like her. Karen was 53 years old, blonde hair touched up monthly at an expensive salon, driving a leased Mercedes she couldn't quite afford, and carrying designer luggage that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She lived in Highlands Ranch, an affluent suburb south of Denver, worked in pharmaceutical sales, and had spent the last 15 years cultivating an image of success that was more performance than reality. Karen was the kind of person who name-dropped constantly, who demanded to speak to managers regularly, and who genuinely believed that her perceived status entitled her to special treatment everywhere she went. She'd never been told no by anyone she considered beneath her social position, and in Karen's mind, airport security definitely qualified as beneath her. That Tuesday morning, Karen was flying to Phoenix for what she'd described to friends as an important business meeting. In reality, it was a last-ditch attempt to save a client relationship that was falling apart because of her increasingly erratic behavior and declining performance. She was running late, stressed about her presentation, and already in the mindset that everyone around her was somehow responsible for her problems. She'd snapped at the parking shuttle driver, complained loudly about the check-in line, and made disparaging comments about the ticket agent's competence. By the time she reached security, Karen was primed for confrontation. Marcus was manning the document check station when Karen approached. Standard procedure required him to examine each passenger's identification and boarding pass, verify the name matched, and check for any security flags in the system. It was routine work that he'd performed thousands of times without incident. Karen handed over her documents with an exaggerated sigh and immediately started tapping her foot impatiently. Marcus examined her driver's license, checked it against her boarding pass, and noticed something that required additional verification. "Ma'am, I need to ask you a few additional questions about your travel today." Karen's expression immediately hardened. Additional questions meant delay, and delay meant she'd be even later for her flight. In her mind, this was unacceptable harassment from someone who should simply wave her through without question. "What kind of questions? I'm already late. Can't you just do whatever you need to do quickly?" Marcus remained professional, his voice calm and controlled. "This is standard procedure, ma'am. I need to verify some information about your travel plans today. It'll just take a moment." Karen looked around at other passengers, moving through security more quickly, and felt her anger rising. She saw a black security officer asking her questions, while other people seemed to breeze through without issue. In her mind, this wasn't random security procedure. This was targeted harassment based on some perceived slight or power trip. "This is ridiculous. I fly all the time. I've never had anyone ask me additional questions. What's your supervisor's name?" Marcus had encountered this response countless times. Passengers who demanded supervisors, who claimed special treatment, who tried to escalate situations rather than simply cooperating with routine procedures. He continued following protocol while maintaining his professional demeanor. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but these questions are part of standard security screening. If you'd prefer to speak with my supervisor, I can call them over, but it will take longer than simply answering a few quick questions." Karen's face flushed red. The idea that this security officer was telling her what would take longer, what was more efficient, what she should do, was infuriating to someone accustomed to giving orders rather than receiving them. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through contacts. "I'm calling someone about this. You people can't just harass passengers because you feel like it. I know people who run this airport." Marcus watched her scroll through her phone and recognized the tactic. Passengers who claimed connections, who threatened to call important people, who tried to intimidate their way out of security procedures they didn't want to follow. He'd seen it hundreds of times and knew that most of these threats were empty bluster from people who had no actual influence. "Ma'am, you're welcome to call anyone you'd like, but I still need to complete this security screening before you can proceed to your gate. The questions will only take a minute if you'd like to answer them now." Karen found the contact she was looking for and held up her phone like it was a weapon. This was her nuclear option, the connection that would put this security officer in his place and remind him exactly who he was dealing with. "I'm calling Councilman Bradley right now. He's a personal friend, and he's going to hear about how you're treating paying customers." Marcus nodded politely. The name meant nothing to him, and even if it had, it wouldn't change his responsibility to follow security procedures. He'd been threatened with calls to mayors, governors, senators, and CEOs. None of them had ever materialized into actual consequences, because airport security followed federal regulations that local politicians couldn't override. "That's your right, ma'am. While you're making your call, I'll have my supervisor come over so we can resolve this efficiently." Marcus reached for his radio to call for supervisory support. This was standard protocol when passengers became difficult or claimed important connections. Having a supervisor present protected both the passenger and the security officer by ensuring procedures were followed correctly and witnessed by management. "Don't you touch that radio. I'm handling this myself." Karen's voice had risen enough that other passengers in line behind her started paying attention. She was creating exactly the kind of scene that experienced travelers try to avoid, drawing attention from multiple security officers and potentially delaying everyone in the checkpoint. "Ma'am, I need to call my supervisor when passengers request to speak with management. That's standard procedure." Karen stepped closer to Marcus, invading his personal space in a way that immediately put him on alert. In 12 years of airport security, he'd learned to recognize when situations were escalating beyond normal passenger frustration into potential threats. "I said, don't call anyone. You're going to answer my questions first. What's your name? What's your badge number? How long have you been working here?" Marcus maintained his position, but didn't step back. Showing weakness or uncertainty would only encourage further aggressive behavior. He kept his voice level and professional while internally preparing for whatever might happen next. "Sir, my name is Marcus Williams. My badge number is visible on my uniform. I've been with airport security for 12 years. Now, if you'd like to proceed with screening or speak with my supervisor, I'm happy to accommodate either option." Karen's anger reached a boiling point. She was being questioned by someone she considered beneath her, in front of other passengers, after claiming important connections that weren't producing immediate results. Her perceived authority was being challenged publicly, and that was unacceptable. 12 years of this, and you still don't know how to treat people properly. You people always think you're in charge of everything. Well, not today. The racial undertone in her comment wasn't lost on Marcus, or the passengers close enough to hear. But he'd experienced this before, and knew that reacting emotionally would only escalate the situation further. He continued following protocol while documenting everything for his eventual report. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back and allow me to do my job. If you continue to interfere with security screening, I'll have to call for additional assistance." That's when Karen made the decision that would change everything. She reached across the security station and grabbed Marcus by his uniform shirt, her manicured nails digging into the fabric as she pulled him toward her. The physical contact crossed every line of airport security protocol and federal law. Marcus immediately stepped back, breaking her grip, but Karen wasn't finished. "You don't get to dismiss me. I'm a tax-paying citizen, and you work for me. Do you understand that?" Her voice carried across the security checkpoint now, drawing stares from dozens of passengers and alerting other security officers to the escalating situation. Marcus kept his hands visible and maintained his professional stance despite the physical assault he'd just experienced. "Ma'am, you just made physical contact with a federal security officer. I need you to calm down immediately and step away from the checkpoint." But Karen was beyond reasoning now. The combination of her mounting personal stress, her perceived public humiliation, and her inability to control the situation had pushed her past the point of rational decision-making. She raised her hand and brought it down hard across Marcus's face. The slap echoed through Terminal C like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. Every phone call paused. Every passenger within 50 feet turned to stare at what had just happened. The security cameras positioned throughout the checkpoint captured the assault from multiple angles in high-definition video that would later be played in courtrooms and news broadcasts across the country. Marcus touched his cheek where the impact had left a red mark, but his training kicked in immediately. He didn't retaliate. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't lose his composure. He reached for his radio with practiced calm while keeping his eyes on Karen. "Control. This is Williams at Checkpoint 7. I need immediate supervisor response and police backup. I've been assaulted by a passenger." The response was instantaneous. Within 30 seconds, 3 additional security officers converged on Checkpoint 7. Within 2 minutes, airport police arrived. Within 5 minutes, Denver Police Department officers were on scene. The entire security checkpoint was temporarily shut down as the situation was contained and documented. Karen seemed to realize what she'd done as soon as the radio call went out. The anger that had driven her to strike a federal officer was quickly replaced by panic as she saw uniformed officers approaching from multiple directions. She started, backing away from Marcus, her hands up in a gesture that was far too late to matter. Wait. I didn't mean to do that. I was just frustrated. I apologize. But assault on a federal security officer isn't something that can be undone with an apology. Officer Sarah Chen, a 10-year veteran of airport police, took control of the situation immediately. "Ma'am, you need to place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for assaulting a federal officer." Karen's composure completely collapsed. The reality of her situation hit her like a physical blow. She wasn't talking her way out of this. Her connections weren't going to save her. She had just committed a federal crime in front of dozens of witnesses and multiple security cameras. No. You don't understand. This is a misunderstanding. I know people. I can make phone calls. Officer Chen had heard these exact words from hundreds of arrested passengers over the years. Everyone knew people. Everyone had connections. Everyone thought their situation was special. But assault was assault, and the law didn't care about anyone's social status or claimed relationships. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As the Miranda warning continued, Karen's legs seemed to give out. The full weight of what she'd done crashed down on her. She wasn't just facing criminal charges. As a pharmaceutical sales representative, she held professional licenses that could be revoked for criminal convictions. Her employer had strict policies about employees arrested for violent crimes. Her reputation in her affluent community would be destroyed when this story inevitably made local news. The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. Karen Whitfield, who had arrived at the airport that morning believing she was above the rules that applied to ordinary people, was now in federal custody facing charges that could result in years in prison. Marcus Williams returned to his post after giving his statement to police. His supervisor offered him the rest of the day off, but Marcus chose to continue working. He'd been assaulted, but he wasn't going to let one passenger's terrible decisions disrupt his commitment to keeping travelers safe. The other passengers in line had watched the entire incident unfold. Many of them approached Marcus as they went through security, offering words of support and expressing their shock at what they'd witnessed. An elderly woman patted his arm and told him she was proud of how professionally he'd handled the situation. A businessman handed him a business card and said if Marcus ever needed a witness for anything related to the incident, he'd be happy to testify. The security footage from the incident was reviewed by federal investigators within hours. The multiple camera angles showed the entire confrontation from start to finish. Karen's aggressive behavior, her racist comments, her physical assault on Marcus, and his professional response throughout the encounter. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Karen was processed at the Federal Detention Center in downtown Denver. Her phone calls to lawyers, to family members, to the connections she'd claimed at the airport revealed the truth about her actual influence. The people she'd name-dropped either didn't know her personally or couldn't help her with federal criminal charges even if they wanted to. Her employer, Meridian Pharmaceuticals, received notification of her arrest within 6 hours. Company policy was clear about employees charged with violent crimes. Karen was terminated immediately, her access to company accounts revoked, her pending sales commissions forfeited. The client meeting she'd been flying to Phoenix to attend was reassigned to another representative. The Transportation Security Administration began their own investigation parallel to the criminal case. Assault on airport security personnel triggered an automatic review for placement on the federal no-fly list. Karen's travel privileges were suspended pending the outcome of both investigations. Local Denver news stations picked up the story that evening. Airport assault stories typically generated significant viewer interest, especially when they involved entitled passengers attacking hard-working security officers. The story had everything news directors loved: clear video evidence, sympathetic victim, unsympathetic perpetrator, and broader themes about respect and consequences. Karen's neighbors in Highlands Ranch saw her mugshot on the 10 o'clock news. Her homeowners association received calls asking about her status as a resident. Her country club membership came under review. The carefully constructed image of success and respectability she'd spent years building crumbled in a single evening of news coverage. Marcus Williams went home to his family that night, with a red mark still visible on his cheek where Karen had slapped him. His wife held him close and told him how proud she was of his restraint and professionalism. His teenage daughters said they'd seen the video online and couldn't believe how calm their father had remained throughout the assault. The federal prosecutor assigned to Karen's case reviewed the evidence and found it among the most clear-cut assault cases she'd ever seen. Multiple camera angles, audio recording, dozens of witnesses, and a victim whose character and professionalism were beyond question. This wasn't a case that would require plea negotiations or complex legal strategies. Karen hired a criminal defense attorney who specialized in federal cases. After reviewing the security footage and witness statements, he delivered news she didn't want to hear. The evidence was overwhelming. Her best option was to accept responsibility, show genuine remorse, and hope for leniency in sentencing. But Karen wasn't ready to accept responsibility. Even from jail, she maintained that she'd been provoked, that Marcus had been unprofessional, that the situation had been blown out of proportion. Her inability to acknowledge the severity of her actions would soon make her legal situation much worse. The story continued to spread beyond Denver. Airport security organizations shared it as an example of the challenges their officers faced. Civil rights groups highlighted it as evidence of the racism that Black professionals encountered daily. Social media amplified every angle of the incident, until Karen Whitfield became a nationwide symbol of entitled behavior and its consequences. The federal courthouse in downtown Denver became the setting for Karen Whitfield's next humiliation 3 weeks after her arrest. She arrived wearing a conservative navy suit that her attorney had recommended, her usually perfect hair showing signs of stress, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't completely hide. The woman who had slapped a federal officer now faced the reality of federal court proceedings where her connections meant nothing and her attitude would determine her future. Judge Patricia Moreno had been on the federal bench for 18 years. She'd presided over thousands of cases involving assault, terrorism threats, and airport security violations. In her experience, defendants fell into 2 categories: those who accepted responsibility for their actions, and those who continued making excuses. Judge Moreno had zero patience for the second category, especially when the evidence was as clear as what she'd reviewed in Karen's case. The courtroom gallery was packed with reporters, curious observers, and several of Marcus Williams' colleagues who had come to support him during the proceedings. Karen's family was notably absent. Her ex-husband had declined to attend, citing their contentious divorce 3 years earlier. Her adult children from her first marriage had distanced themselves after seeing the airport footage on social media. Assistant Federal Prosecutor Maria Santos stood to present the government's case. She was 34 years old, daughter of immigrants, and had built her reputation prosecuting cases involving violence against federal employees. She'd seen the airport security footage dozens of times while preparing her case, and it never failed to anger her how Karen had treated Marcus Williams. Your Honor, the evidence in this case is overwhelming and disturbing. The defendant, Karen Whitfield, committed unprovoked assault against Transportation Security Officer Marcus Williams while he was performing his lawful duties. The entire incident was captured on multiple security cameras and witnessed by dozens of passengers. Santos played the security footage on the courtroom monitors. The jury watched in silence as Karen's racist comments, aggressive behavior, and the assault itself unfolded in high definition. Several jurors visibly recoiled when they heard Karen say, "You people," and saw her strike Marcus across the face. This wasn't a moment of temporary frustration or a misunderstanding that got out of hand. This was a calculated assault by someone who believed her perceived social status placed her above the law. The defendant grabbed Officer Williams's uniform, made racially charged comments, and then struck him in the face hard enough that the sound echoed throughout the terminal. Karen's attorney, David Richardson, had warned her that the video evidence made their defense extremely difficult. Their only strategy was to argue for leniency based on Karen's previously clean criminal record and claim that stress had caused a momentary lapse in judgment. But Karen had insisted on testifying in her own defense, against Richardson's strong advice. When Karen took the stand, her sense of entitlement hadn't diminished, despite 3 weeks in federal custody. She wore an expression of wounded dignity, as if she were the victim of some elaborate misunderstanding rather than a defendant who had committed assault in front of dozens of witnesses. "I was having a very stressful morning," she began, her voice carrying the same condescending tone she'd used at the airport. "I was late for an important business meeting, and Officer Williams was asking unnecessary questions that were delaying my travel. I felt like I was being singled out for additional screening when other passengers were moving through more quickly." Prosecutor Santos stood for cross-examination with barely concealed anticipation. Karen's decision to testify gave Santos the opportunity to expose her complete lack of remorse and continued racism under oath. "Ms. Whitfield, you testified that you felt singled out for additional screening. Are you suggesting that Officer Williams targeted you based on some personal bias?" "I'm suggesting that the additional questions seemed unnecessary and unprofessional." "Ms. Whitfield, have you reviewed the security footage of your interaction with Officer Williams?" "Yes, I have." "Did Officer Williams raise his voice at any point during your interaction?" "No, but his attitude was condescending." "Did Officer Williams make any threatening gestures toward you?" "Not threatening, but he was dismissive." "Ms. Whitfield, when you told Officer Williams, 'You people always think you're in charge,' what did you mean by 'you people'?" Karen's face flushed as she realized the trap she'd walked into. Her attorney had warned her about this exact question, but she'd been confident she could explain away her racist language. "I meant security personnel in general. People who work in positions where they have to follow procedures." Santos played the audio from the security footage again, emphasizing Karen's tone and the context of her comment. The jury heard the racial undertone clearly, and several members shook their heads in disgust. "Miss Whitfield, you grabbed Officer Williams' uniform shirt before striking him. Was that because you felt physically threatened?" "I was trying to get his attention because he wasn't listening to me." "So you decided that physically grabbing a federal officer was an appropriate way to get his attention?" "It wasn't planned. It was a reaction to his unprofessional behavior." "And striking him across the face? Was that also a reaction to his alleged unprofessional behavior?" "I was frustrated and overwhelmed. I shouldn't have done that." The admission that she shouldn't have done that was the closest Karen came to accepting responsibility. But even that was qualified by her continued insistence that Marcus had somehow provoked her actions. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found Karen guilty on all charges: assault on a federal officer, interference with airport security operations, and disorderly conduct in a federal facility. The verdict surprised no one who had watched the trial, but it devastated Karen, who had somehow convinced herself that her explanation would be accepted. Judge Moreno scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later, giving probation officers time to prepare a comprehensive report on Karen's background, employment history, and likelihood of reoffending. What they discovered painted a picture of someone whose entitled behavior had been escalating for years. Karen's former colleagues at Meridian Pharmaceuticals provided statements about her increasingly difficult personality. Customer complaints had multiplied over the past 2 years. She'd been written up for arguing with airport personnel during business travel. Her sales performance had declined as clients complained about her attitude and unprofessional conduct. Her neighbors in Highlands Ranch described years of conflicts over homeowners association rules, complaints about other residents, and demands for special treatment regarding everything from parking spaces to landscaping guidelines. The woman who had claimed important connections had actually alienated most of the people in her social circle through her behavior. The Transportation Security Administration completed their review and placed Karen on the federal no-fly list permanently. The decision was based not just on her assault conviction, but on her continued lack of remorse and the risk she posed to aviation security. Karen would never be allowed to fly commercially again in the United States. Marcus Williams returned to work the day after the trial ended. His colleagues welcomed him back with applause and expressions of support. The incident had made him something of a hero among airport security personnel nationwide, a symbol of professionalism under pressure and dignity in the face of racism. He'd received hundreds of emails from travelers who had seen the story and wanted to thank him for his service. Flight attendants, pilots, and airport workers from across the country shared their own stories of difficult passengers and expressed gratitude for security officers like Marcus, who kept everyone safe. The PILE Airport Security Union presented Marcus with a commendation for his handling of the incident. His calm professionalism under assault had been used in training videos to show other officers how to maintain composure during violent encounters with passengers. Marcus's family had struggled with the public attention surrounding the case. His daughters had been proud of their father, but uncomfortable with strangers recognizing them and wanting to discuss the incident. His wife worried about copycat attacks from people who might target Marcus because of his prominence in the news coverage. But Marcus himself had found peace with what happened. He'd done his job exactly as he'd been trained. He'd protected other passengers by following security procedures. He'd maintained his dignity when faced with racism and violence. And he'd seen the system work as it should, with consequences following actions regardless of someone's perceived social status. The sentencing hearing drew another packed courtroom. Karen appeared noticeably thinner, her designer clothes now hanging loosely on her frame. 3 weeks in federal custody followed by house arrest had taken a visible toll on someone accustomed to spa treatments and regular salon visits. Marcus Williams attended the sentencing hearing, sitting in the front row with his wife and colleagues. He'd been asked if he wanted to provide a victim impact statement, but had declined. He felt his professionalism during the incident spoke louder than any words he could offer about its aftermath. Prosecutor Santos recommended a sentence of 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. She argued that Karen's lack of genuine remorse and continued attempts to justify her behavior showed she posed a continued threat to federal employees. Karen's attorney pleaded for probation with community service, arguing that his client had learned her lesson and posed no future threat. He presented character letters from family friends and former colleagues, though notably none from recent acquaintances who had witnessed her behavior over the past few years. Judge Moreno had reviewed everything: the security footage, the trial testimony, the probation report, and Karen's complete lack of accountability. Her decision was swift and decisive. Ms. Whitfield, you committed an unprovoked assault against a federal officer who was simply doing his job. Your behavior was racist, entitled, and completely unacceptable. Even more troubling is your continued refusal to accept full responsibility for your actions. Karen stood silently as the judge continued, her face pale and her hands trembling. You have shown the court that you believe your perceived social status entitles you to special treatment and exempts you from the consequences that apply to everyone else. This court strongly disagrees with that assessment. The sentence was harsh but fair. 15 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation, community service working with organizations that serve underprivileged communities, mandatory anger management counseling, and restitution to cover Marcus Williams's medical expenses and lost wages. Karen's legs buckled as the sentence was read. The reality that she would spend more than a year in federal prison for a moment of racist violence finally broke through her delusions about the severity of her actions. As federal marshals prepared to escort her to custody, Karen turned toward Marcus Williams one final time. For a moment, it seemed like she might finally offer a genuine apology. Instead, she looked away without speaking, unable even at the end to acknowledge the humanity of the man she had assaulted. The story of Karen Whitfield became a cautionary tale shared in airport security training programs across the country. Her mugshot appeared in presentations about de-escalation techniques and the importance of maintaining professionalism when faced with difficult passengers. Social media continued sharing the airport footage months after the sentencing. Comment sections filled with people sharing their own experiences with entitled passengers, racist encounters, and the importance of consequences for people who think rules don't apply to them. Karen began serving her sentence at a federal correctional institution in Colorado, far from the affluent lifestyle she'd tried so hard to maintain. Her Highlands Ranch house went into foreclosure within 6 months. Her leased Mercedes was repossessed. The image of success she'd spent years cultivating disappeared as completely as her freedom. Marcus Williams continued working at Denver International Airport, earning promotions and commendations for his continued excellence in airport security. He became a trainer for new officers, teaching them not just procedures and protocols, but how to maintain dignity and professionalism when faced with the worst behavior from passengers. His story inspired other federal employees who faced daily challenges from difficult people who refused to respect their authority or their humanity. Marcus had shown that doing your job with integrity and professionalism was its own form of victory, regardless of what others might do or say. The case established legal precedent for prosecuting assault against airport security personnel with full federal penalties. Defense attorneys could no longer argue that brief moments of frustration or stress justified physical violence against federal employees performing their duties. Karen Whitfield's story serves as a stark reminder that actions have consequences, regardless of who you think you are or what connections you claim to have. One slap in an airport security line destroyed her career, her reputation, her freedom, and her ability to travel commercially for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, Marcus Williams demonstrated what true professionalism looks like under the worst circumstances, earning respect and recognition that no amount of money or status could buy. This wasn't just about one racist woman losing control. This was about a system that finally worked the way it's supposed to work. Evidence mattered more than excuses. Character mattered more than connections. Justice prevailed over perceived privilege, and a hard-working federal officer who was just doing his job got the respect and vindication he deserved.